We have a lot of action going on down at that ornery border. It can never just sit still. Texas border city on edge as Governor Abbott dials up battle with Biden. A century and a half ago, Confederate General Joseph Orville Shelby, that's a Confederate general name, isn't it? Joseph Orville Shelby splashed into the wild waters of the Rio Grande off this border city and fled to Mexico, refusing to surrender his battle flag to Union soldiers. Now the park named in his honor has become a front line in a feud between the state and the federal government, a power struggle over who ultimately has the right to control the border and the tide of humanity trying to cross it. Texas National Guard Humvees carry rifle-toting troops and patrol newly erected gates to the municipal park previously used for family cookouts and Independence Day festivities. Tents, military trucks, heavy equipment, and portable toilets dot the edge of a Browning fairway. Along the riverbank, Governor Greg Abbott has ordered the state National Guard to deploy coils of razor wire, rusting shipping containers, and dirt-filled barrels to declare his state's sovereignty. I mean, let's face it. If you were going to bet on where the Civil War would start, I mean, Texas would be the number one pick, right? In a Shelby-like act of defiance, the governor is invoking the state's right to defend itself against what he sees as an invasion. I'm getting the sense that this author has a grudging respect for Shelby. Abbott made national headlines when he seized the park in Eagle Pass this month and shut out U.S. Border Patrol agents who had long used the terrain as a staging point, action the governor's supporters saw as a take-charge move, while his detractors viewed it as a dangerous overreach of state power. The U.S. Supreme Court has ordered Abbott to allow Border Patrol agents to remove or cut wire to reach the river and aid migrants in distress. Abbott's troops are installing even more wire. 25 Republican governors recently signed a letter expressing their support for Abbott's rebellion. I like that. That's what it's going to be known as in the history books. And former President Donald Trump is calling on states to join the standoff. The feud between Abbott and the Biden administration is heating up just as the presidential election campaign gets underway. The issue has galvanized Republicans, some of whom are now questioning the merits of a bipartisan border package tied to Ukraine aid after Trump called it meaningless. President Biden has been pushed to take a harsher stance, declaring Friday that he would shut down the southern border when illegal crossings surge. It's like congestion pricing he's going to institute down there.
Yeah.
Caught in the fray are the residents of Eagle Pass, originally known as El Paso del Aguila, after the Mexican eagles that flew through nearby woods. The state's border with Mexico is an international boundary under the jurisdiction of federal authorities, but Abbott and his allies contend they have the right to intervene because the Biden administration hasn't done enough to staunch the record number of migrants trying to enter Texas illegally in recent months. But even as residents criticize Abbott's push, they grumble about the resources that migration has drained from public coffers. Local fire and police are sometimes so busy handling calls at the river that ambulances and personnel are not available for residents. Patients have had to wait for a bed at the hospital because injured or sick migrants occupy all 18 of them. Quote, "We cannot afford thousands of people coming through our community," said Mavericks County Attorney Jamie Arrichetta, who signed 40 invoices recently to reimburse local officials who handled the remains of migrants. The state has provided more than $8 million to help modernize the county attorney's office, reimburse costs to law enforcement, and pay for new vehicles, equipment, and personnel to prosecute thousands of state trespassing cases filed against migrants arrested by state troopers. "We're grateful for the money," said Arrichetta, the county attorney, "but it's not fixing it." Abbott's initiative also stimulated economic development, residents said. See, immigration helps the economy. The city was showing steady growth before the migration crisis, data shows, but the short and long-term rental market has exploded with the deployment of hundreds of Texas soldiers, as well as troops from other states sent by their governors. A 3-bedroom rental home went from $1,200 a month to more than $2,000, according to Texas real estate data. You can't even get a studio in New York for that. So, a room at the Holiday Inn Express is going for $250 a night, and top-tier hotels are solidly sold out for 4-month periods. Restaurants like the Wagon Wheel, known for its brisket sandwich, are favorite lunch spots for Florida law enforcement in town for border assignments. Economically speaking, our community has benefited. Migration is good for business, said Aranda, the former county judge. Humanitarianly speaking, is that a word? It's another story. Okay, look, man, I would, what I'm taking away from that is our problems are solved. Every town and city in America needs a mass influx of migrants, supported by federal money in order to explode the local economy. So you heard it here first on the Jimmy Dore Show. We have solved the economic crisis and lowering standards of living in America. Keaton, you co-sign that? Can we go forward with that as our platform for 2024?
I mean, you're the resident economist, so I suppose I should take your word for it.
First mistake.
But yeah, but I mean, what you said at the top of that is true. If there is a place that a civil war would start, it would be Texas. And if there were a dispute, it would start over. It would be something like this small technical thing that becomes bigger and bigger. And I don't see how this ends any other way but Biden just kind of standing down, because because the Republicans hold all the cards on the issue. It said in that piece, it says this issue has galvanized Republicans. This issue has galvanized everybody. When I went to New Hampshire, I went to a Trump event, but I also went to 2 Nikki Haley events where there were a lot of Democrats and independents who were drifting towards what we might call the center, even though it's not really the center. I think Haley is quite extreme, but their number 1 and 2 issues were invariably border, jobs, border, inflation, right? One of those 2 things. But this southern border issue is at the top of so many people's minds in a way that it really hasn't been in the past. Even in 2016, when Trump ran on, building the wall, that was a nice sort of metaphor for his entire campaign. But this is really a top tier issue now. This was always kind of a B tier issue for a lot of people. This is an A tier issue for almost everybody now. And why would the Republicans cave and say, okay, we'll take border security. You give us, we'll take that in exchange. We'll give you money for Ukraine. What's in it for them to do that when they could just say, well, fuck you, take your Ukraine money, shove it up your ass. We'll enforce the border ourselves. Oh, we can't? Well, come do something about it. Are they going to do something about it? I don't think they hold the cards to do something about it.
All right. So there's an interesting element of this. All right. So in Hollywood, there's a term called parallel development. And going to Jimmy's interest in Young, it's kind of a synchronicities thing where no one can explain it, but for some reason, everyone at the same time is working on an Alexander the Great script, right? As happened a few years ago. You had a bunch of projects about Alexander the Great. And it's not that these people have talked to each other and said, hey, I'm doing Alexander the Great, and the person steals the idea. It's just parallel development. People have the same idea at the same time. So you have these Civil War movies that are coming out now where, they're gaming out a civil war in America. And some people see it as a psyop where they're preparing the American public for what they want to happen. I think the alternate view is it's parallel development, right? Where the government is preparing a civil war at the same exact time that Hollywood is getting interested in it because of that Jungian synchronicity. Civil war is in the air. So what do you think it is? Do you think it's Davos directed civil war, or do you think it's parallel development, or both actually?
I would say parallel development more. I mean, this has just sort of been in the air for a long time. I think at a certain point, systems gain a momentum of their own to the point where everybody is really along for the ride. I mean, yeah, you have a sort of hierarchy within that train, right? But at a certain point, once the train gets moving, everybody's on it. Some people are in the front of the car, some people are in the rear cars, and obviously the people on the front try and keep their seat on the front so they don't get pushed to the back. So that's a lot of what we're seeing now. But I think this thing has kind of generated a momentum of its own. This is why you've had politicians on the right call for a national divorce, right? It's not all coming from the Davos set, right? At a certain point, it sets in that this is just the way we're headed. Right. Are people steering it, or did people sort of build a system that's now just has everybody along going one way, the wrong way, if you don't want a civil war? But that just seems to be where all the momentum has been. And so I would say, yes, it's more the latter to answer your question. That's not to say that there aren't people who are making preparations for that. Like that's the other thing. You can look at the sort of Davos set and think that they're engineering this. Maybe they just see what's coming. And because they have the resources to get as out in front of it as they can, they do that. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're driving it. I think these systems gain a momentum of their own past a certain point, and I think we are well past that point. We long past that point. We were really past that point, I would say, in Bush's second term. And then the chance to redirect that, we thought at the time, and I won't speak for the audience, but I'll speak for myself, we thought Obama represented a chance to turn that around, and of course he didn't. And we've been living with the consequences of that failure ever since.
Well, and then we thought Bernie was kind of the Hail Mary.
Right.
Not speaking for the audience, but if you're coming out of that movement as me and Keaton, a lot of people, I think, who watch this show, even Jimmy, really. It's just that Jimmy caught on early. Jimmy caught on as soon as Sanders endorsed Clinton. The rest of us, most of the rest of us, it took a little while longer. Now, we're such sad political junkies. We actually talk politics when we're not in front of a camera. So you said you don't think Biden has the balls to actually send the troops down.
Yeah. So because I think we are on this trajectory towards, social collapse, right? That could manifest in a formal civil war. But in this case, I don't think it will, because I think the centralized government is just too weak. I don't think they're up for it. I can't imagine they're up for it. I could be wrong, obviously. I'll have to book myself a dinner date with James O'Keefe, and maybe I'll tell him what's really going to happen. But my sense is, for what it's worth, James, if you want to wine and dine me a bit, I don't think they'll have the balls to actually pull the trigger on it.
I'm really not sure. I feel like there are a lot of people who make these decisions beyond Joe Biden. I don't know if they're going to feel like they can afford to have a bunch of states in open rebellion for a year. You might be right. I don't know. I'm on the fence.
Well, the way to deal with that is just to give in. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying they may just give in. They may just decide not to enforce this.
Well, but that is letting these states be in open rebellion, because you're talking about a Supreme Court order that they're in defiance of.
Right, but I'm talking about an armed conflict where you actually have a shootout, right, where it actually blows up into something super chaotic and violent. They could just exist and operate in defiance of a court order that the executive branch chooses not to enforce, right?
Right. And
I mean,
my question
that's how I see that happening. And then then what they do is they take that, they make an issue out of it, and they try and run on it. Good luck. Good luck. This is why I say they don't have the cards on the issue. They don't have the public backing their point of view. And that's ultimately where they look very weak and are very weak, because what I think is there will be a sort of open rebellion that they will just not be able to crack down upon, because the only way to do that will be to cause chaos and violence. And I don't think they're up for it. I could be wrong. Like I said, I'm no expert here. I'm just giving you what I think.
So, but ultimately you're saying to buy gold.
Yeah, right, exactly.
That's not to be construed as financial advice. Full disclaimer.
Hey, come see us do a live stand-up show. We're going to be in Omaha, Des Moines, Milwaukee, Lansing, Michigan, Bend, Oregon, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, Philadelphia, Avenel, New Jersey, Boston, Palm Springs, and more. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets. See you at a live show.